Get analysis and insights to fuel your decision-making with a subscription to American Banker, the industry's most essential resource. Unmatched coverage of the banking world, original research and industry rankings, access to thought leaders. Gain the advantage for your business by subscribing today at americanbanker.com/subscribe.
Welcome to the Oh Hell No podcast, where I, Keisha Nicole, delivers a daily dose of passion, purpose, and struggle by interviewing people who are living their best life doing what they love. Here on this podcast, every Oh Hell No moment serves a purpose. Now let's get started with the show. Let's get into it. All right. So welcome to the Oh Hell No podcast. So today I have Amy E. Smith. She's a life coach, a self-love expert, a podcaster, and she goes by the Joy Junkie. And oh yeah, she's a badass too, right?
Oh, yeah. Self-identified.
Yeah. So welcome, Amy. Thank you for being here.
I'm excited to connect with you. I think we'll have fun.
Yes, I love it. So stand up for yourself without being a dick. 9 proven challenges to radically improve your self-confidence and self-love. I love that.
Yes.
I love it. Yeah. So we're going to talk about your book. We're going to talk about all the stuff that you got going on. But the first thing I want to ask you is, how long were you a people pleaser?
Oh, wow. So probably, I think it wasn't really until my dad died that I started really shifting and learning about speaking up for myself. And there's kind of a story behind that. So I grew up in an extremely conservative, born-again Christian family. And my father had a master's in divinity and a doctorate in ministry. So not fucking around, right? Like not fucking around. And so there was a lot of very stringent dogma and a lot of motivation through guilt and fear, very evangelical. A lot of the things that I do not associate with at all any longer. And so growing up, there was a lot of, here's what makes you a good person, a good girl. Here's what is expected of you. So there was a lot of kind of twisting and contorting to fit into a very specific mold that was quite mandatory, right? Because anyone who kind of deviated from that, it was, you were kind of ostracized from the group. And being someone who was an extremely free spirit and super creative and artsy and wanting to get involved in creative arts and makeup and things like that was deemed very vain. And so the way that sort of evolved is I guess it was up until I was about 27, and I had started getting involved in law of attraction. I had started getting involved in understanding sort of the metaphysical world and branching out in my spirituality. I had started getting involved in coaching and went to coaching school. And this was kind of in the mid 2000s. And so I was starting to kind of deviate from a lot of the dogma that I was raised with, but I didn't feel like I could really speak up for it. So what that looked like is I would tell my husband, okay, when we go to my mom's or go to my parents' house, let's, don't cuss, don't drink, no Jon Stewart, no gay rights, no Howard Stern, no South Park, like none of the stuff we talk about, none of the stuff that happens in our household, like we need to put sort of this fake front, this facade. And I think that kind of came to a head. My father passed away in 2007. And I knew, because prior to doing what I do now, I worked as a makeup artist, and I knew very strongly, I was incredibly convicted that I wanted to do the makeup on his dead body, dead dad makeup time.
Wow.
And because I felt like it would be an asshole move to be like, Dad, just you go get your own makeup artist, right? Like,
yeah.
I felt like I have this skill set. Of course, I'm not letting anybody else touch him. And I also spoke to the eulogy of the crowd of hundreds. My father was really, truly an incredible human. And, in the midst of a bunch of religion that I didn't subscribe to anymore, dealing with an incredible amount of grief and pain. And we get back home, to my mom's house. And so I'm feeling like I'm winning at daughter. Like I'm winning at daughter today for sure. And we get back home to my mom's house and she finds it the most opportune time to say, well, it just feels like your father and I have failed as parents. And I was like, wait, what? Talk about, oh, hell no moment.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I could kind of muster in that moment was I don't think that you should say that to a child. I don't think that's an appropriate thing to say to a child. And a bit of context with that is my two younger siblings had both done jail time and didn't go to school and had caused a lot of financial hardship for my family. And I was the one working since I was 14, got out, got married, put myself through school, all of that kind of thing. But here I was lumped in as, you're not, quote, walking with the Lord, you don't subscribe to the religion, so you are a failure. And that was a huge pivotal moment where I kind of realized, okay, I don't think it's always an ultimatum to speak up for yourself. But in some cases, it comes down to, I either need to choose you, making you happy, or I need to choose me. And that was a very distinct moment where I said, okay, if push comes to shove and I need to make that decision, I choose me. And that created a massive shift internally. It was super messy right after that. But that was truly the beginning of learning that there was a cost to making sure that everyone was taken care of. And that really started to shift things for me internally, and then now is very much infused in the work that I do.
Wow, what a story. So when your father passed, is that when you actually spoke up about not really being into the religion stuff anymore? So that's when your mom realized that, oh, she's really not doing what we want her to do?
Yeah, I think that there was this piece of, my father was an incredible intellect. And although he was very involved in the church and the faith, he was also very open-minded. So we could have really incredible conversations about deism or monotheism or even abortion rights. And he would have a very liberal perspective of, I'm not on board, but I don't know if it's the government's call, right? And so it wasn't like a typical evangelical conversation, whereas my mom was much more, whatever anybody told her, she was on board, right? Any Christian outlet or news story or anything like that, it was just kind of a follower. So when my dad passed, there was this disconnect of twofold. One was not being able to have deep conversations with him about that, but then also that there were not two of them. And I think I was a bit bolstered by that now it was just myself and my mom. And so it wasn't as though I had to speak up to two of them. I'm like, okay, we're down one. maybe I can be a bit more vocal now. And truth be told too, it was incredibly tumultuous for her to lose her spouse. They were married for almost 30 years at the time that he passed. And she had to relearn a lot of things. And I think because I was the oldest, she leaned on me for a lot of things like social support and emotional support. And I'm over here like, I've got a fucking husband and a life over here. And I'm also grieving him too. So there was some ego and some frustration and I'll tell you what, that was sort of a floodgate that opened, and I became incredibly combative and adversarial. And I was not kind. I was not standing up for myself without being a dick. I was being a classic dick. And I wanted to fight about everything. It was like all these things that I had been quiet about for so long, I wanted to fight about it. And it wasn't until multiple times of needing to clean up my mess with my mom and going back to her and saying things like, hey, I still feel very strongly about what we conversed about, but I should not have delivered that in the way that I did. You did not deserve for me to speak to you in that way. And for that, I'm extremely sorry. And I think that was one of my big learnings too, was, oh shit, you can actually speak up for yourself and you don't have to be causing a ruckus and be fighting and be so aggressive. You can actually do it with the utmost grace and kindness. You can ask for a divorce with compassion and love. You can ask your adult children to move out of the house. You can tell your parents that you are transitioning or that you are gay or what, and you can do all of that with assertiveness and kindness and love. And it wasn't until many, many years of doing it like a bat out of hell that I realized, oh, it's actually a lot more powerful to stand in that assertive quality. And there have been times where she has said, well, I just don't approve of that. And I have said, I can understand your perspective. And I know that it must be really hard to have a daughter who isn't aligned with what you raised her with. And I actually don't need you to approve of me because I approve of me. And that shit right there was so hard to get to that place. I think that's one of the biggest problems with people pleasing is we think if I lose any affection, approval, support, then that must mean I'm not valuable or that I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case. In fact, it's never the case.
Absolutely. So you were a makeup artist before.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Were you very passionate about that? Did you love it? Or what happened that made you say, I think I'm going to go into life coaching?
Well, first of all, let's not get it twisted. I was life coaching everyone who was in my chair. And so, I would have people who would just start always when people would sit in the chair, they would immediately start talking shit on themselves. And they would say, oh, don't look at my eyebrows, or, oh my gosh, my wrinkles, or, oh, my breakout. And then they would always inevitably start talking about whatever was happening for them in their life. And so then they would start being really self-deprecating about things that were happening in their interpersonal affairs. And so I would start telling them, okay, the next time I hear you say something negative about yourself, I'm going to demand that you say 3 positive things. And this was before any training, before any reading of things, or I didn't even know. And, I was super young, early 20s, and they would get stumped. Like, I don't know what to say. And I would be like, okay, well, first of all, you just told me, I'll do it for you. You just told me that you were super kind to your sister. So you're super generous. I already understand that about you. And so I would kind of feed that back to them. And to answer your question, I was extremely passionate about it. I still identify as being a massive creative spirit. I think it just has taken different avenues over the decades of my life. And I really believed for a long time that that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I was on that trajectory. I worked for a prestige makeup brand, and I don't often say the name. And I was climbing up the corporate ladder. I was a regional trainer for them. And so I was responsible for artist training and development. Mm-hmm. And that came with a lot of red tape. And, I would find myself working on spreadsheets about lipstick in the middle of the night and just going, what the hell is this? This is not what I wanted to do. And I ended up having a pretty epic quarter life crisis where I realized that my relationships weren't stronger. My marriage wasn't stronger. My health wasn't better. I was missing all sorts of important events because I was constantly working, and I was way too young to be doing that and be tethered to something that was stealing my joy. So it started off as being a massive passion, and then I started to fall out of love with it. But there were so many components that it taught me where my passion does lie. So I realized as I transitioned into a newer field, okay, first of all, I've got to be doing something that has a creative element. I know that I need to be teaching and delivering information because as a trainer, that was incredibly empowering to me. I loved teaching and training the events. So I started kind of taking stock of what are the things that the components that I do love, and then let's let go of the things I don't love, which was working holidays and weekends and putting myself through the ringer and commuting for somebody else's big dream and vision. And I wanted to be my own boss. So there was a lot in that transition that I really stood back and observed what are the things that I love about this, and then what are the things I don't.
I love how you were able to like weed out those things and, figure out your next move, but take the things that you loved from your current passion. That's what I need to do. So thank you for that, Amy.
Sure, sure. Well, most of the time we run around just all pissed, right? Like, here's what I
Mhm.
fucking hate. Here's what I hate. Here's what I hate. And it's like, okay, well, if you hate working weekends, what does that mean? That means I really want to work during the weekdays, or I want more autonomy, or I want this, or I don't like being in a huge organization. I want to be with just like a small, intimate group, or I want a lot of collaboration, or I want to work just by myself. Like, there's a lot of stuff you already know, but we usually have to look at what pisses us off to find it.
Yeah, I love that. So there are a lot of life coaches, right, out there, and I
Yep.
interview quite a few of them. And I like to ask you guys, what makes you, how do you stay authentic to your message or whatever it is that you're trying to do in people's lives? So I want to ask you that first, and then I want you to answer, what do you think makes you an effective life coach?
Well, I think to answer the first question is this profession keeps me so honest. And I think largely because my particular area of expertise is in all things communication, speaking up for yourself, saying no, difficult conversations, and all of that is really rooted in how you feel about yourself. So there's that internal component of believing that your voice and who you are matters and that you're worthy and that you're enough. And then the external piece of how do I now communicate that with the world? How do I now tell somebody, no, you cannot touch my pregnant belly, or no, I'm not going to do that project with you, even though you are trying to guilt trip me. What are the actual phrases that sounds like? So the way that looks for me is, you better believe if I have an issue with my best friend or my husband, or most recently, I had an issue with a speaking engagement that I was doing, and I could feel it very viscerally that I had to speak up. There was no way that I could be quiet about it. And so those are some of the ways in which I force myself to walk my talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the internal piece, it's the same thing of we're never done, right? Like you don't go to the gym and get a rockin' body and then give it up. You have to maintain. You have to keep making sure you're consuming things that are fueling your system. You have to keep getting into the gym and moving the body, or whatever it is for you. The same is true for personal development. You don't fucking arrive. You're not like, all right, done. I've figured it all out. So I still have a hypnotherapist that I see. I have a coach that I see. I'm constantly investing in myself. I would want that from any other practitioner. I would want to make sure that they are still studying and that they are still getting support. So I think that's one thing that's really, really important to me is just that there is a elevated level and a bar that's set that you have to walk your talk, and you can see it a mile away. I'm sure you have come across that,
Mm-hmm.
where you're like, oh, really? Yeah, tell me more about that without advice. and so I think that's one huge piece is actually implementing the work that you're teaching. And I don't think that I can always learn from myself. That's why I always have other practitioners in my world. To answer your second question about what differentiates me, this is kind of twofold. I think one thing to really keep in mind is I think many people are sharing much of the same message. And it comes down to, who do you feel safe with? Who do you resonate with? Who is the messenger that you want to learn from? Because there might be people who talk to you about speaking up, or about tough conversations, or about believing in yourself, or what self-worth looks like. But I really think it's about, who is the person that I can hear that message from? I think that's super important. So I think that's one of the reasons why some traditional therapies don't work, is because you're kind of forced into a relationship with somebody you don't feel safe with. But that can be the case for acupuncture or chiropractic or a doctor or anything like that. So to me, there's also this spiritual level of connecting with people and going, okay, that's the messenger that I want to listen to. And, on a personal note, what's really important to me, and a differentiating factor is that I'm constantly infusing new modalities into my work. So I'm also a hypnotherapist. So now I have started to work in the last couple of years with a lot more messaging to the subconscious mind that's not always infused in coaching, and an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming perspective, which is another coaching modality. You know, a bunch of kind of tools in the tool belt that sometimes I come across coaches who are like, oh, I went through this hard thing. Now I can tell everybody how to do it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have the skill set of what coaching actually is. And so I think it's important to be educated and go to an actual establishment, not one that is like, yay, you came to a weekend and now you're a coach. No. Like, you have to submit hours. You have to be observed. You have to really throw yourself into the modality to be an expert at it. And so that's one side element for me that's incredibly important and that I'm very proud of, is having a very robust portfolio to the education behind the work that I do.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because there are a lot of people who think that just because they've navigated a tough time that they're qualified to life coach people. And I agree with you. I don't think that everybody is a damn life coach. I'm sorry, but just keeping it real.
That's
so
right.
I'm glad that you said that, you know. The hypnosis thing.
Yeah.
You think you can hypnotize me, because I have this like fear of water and it's keeping me from learning how to swim. And
sure.
We're really interested in that. I swear to you, I'm like being serious.
I believe you.
I don't know what I get in the pool and stuff like that, but it has to be a certain, you know, like depth, and I don't want anybody playing around with me. Like I'm like, you know what I mean?
Yes,
so
I do.
I think there's something there that's like, I don't know, in my subconscious that's like keeping me from just being like, okay, I just want to learn how to swim. Like, I don't know how to swim, so just teach me, without that fear of like, oh my God, I'm going to drown if I'm not holding on to anything. Well, what's holding me? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, those are all the thoughts that are going through my head. So,
yes. Well, so here's what's really fascinating about how the mind works. So to answer your question, yes, you can absolutely create new neural pathways in the mind that change your relationship with water. So the mind is broken up into two major parts, subconscious and conscious mind. And the conscious function of the brain is typically, I've seen it estimated everywhere from like 5% to 12%, but a very minimal amount is the conscious mind. And that's where we have logic, reason, rationale, and also willpower. So it's a very, very small function of the mind. Now compare that to, you know, roughly 88 to 95% is the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is what is beneath, right? Beneath the consciousness. So it's not something that's playing obviously to us, but the subconscious mind is what houses our beliefs, our habits, our values, and it also is where our primary fear response is housed. So when we are born, we are only born with two innate fears. One of them is not water, so you're good. But one of them is fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Everything other than that has been learned, which is great news because you can unlearn it. It's not a part of our fiber. So something has happened in that subconscious mind, usually in your formative years, usually prior to age 8, not always, but where you registered in your mind that water was unsafe, that it warranted fear. And now that has become the association. So even though consciously your mind says, that's stupid, you're safe, I can touch the bottom, I understand you're not going to attack me, there's no sharks, there's no, whatever it is consciously, that doesn't fucking matter, because the subconscious is that large 95% that's running the show. So that's the part of hypnosis, is it helps bridge the gap between those two things so that you can create a new association in the subconscious mind. But that's not dissimilar to what I do with students all the time around self-worth, right? It's like, oh, I know I should speak up for myself. I know that I should believe in who I am. Oh, but I have all this old shit that's actually driving the car. And so we have to kind of dismantle that in order to have congruency. So yes.
Deep. Yes, I love that. Yes, Amy. See, and this goes back to what you said about feeling comfortable with someone and allowing them to help you, because I've been thinking about this for a long time, but then here goes the crazy part of me again. Well, what if I go to a guy that hypnotizes me and then he's like touching my boobs or something while I'm under, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking all these crazy things, not that I have big boobs, but you know, still, I'm just saying, it's like, it can happen.
Yes.
Right. You know, so I feel comfortable like talking to you and feeling like, you know, you might be the one to help me. So
cool. Well, what you also are pointing to, which is really fascinating. So there is the critical factor of the mind is right in between the subconscious and the conscious. It's like a little guard dog. And what that means is that then becomes our inner critic. It is trying to keep you safe, because what it's doing is everything that's in that subconscious, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's a fear of water, that is recognized in your mind as a known. We know that. That's true for us. We know that. So anytime you deviate from that, like, oh, maybe I can go see a dude hypnotherapist, that critical factor of the mind, also known as the inner critic, goes, hey girl, better not do that. He's going to fill you up. Right?
Isn't that crazy though? Oh my God, that is so crazy.
It's exactly why you listen to, you know, maybe somebody listened to your episode with Joan Gilfand about writing a book.
Yeah.
And they get all jazzed. And then that critical factor comes in and goes, who do you think you are? You don't know what you're doing. Why? Because that's what's known in the mind. So it's trying to keep you exactly where you are because it registers as safe. So when we know that, and what's so beautiful about the hypnotic process is it puts that little guard dog to sleep. It basically makes it so that you can bypass and drop right into the subconscious mind. But just to rest assured, you can't be hypnotized to do anything you don't actually want to do. So you will have full consciousness and all of that. You would be slapping that dude away real fast.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. See, people, and I didn't even know that Amy did this. This just unfolded. So I don't know. Some things.
Oh, I'm full of surprises, girl.
Right. So, when you started as an entrepreneur, now you're venturing out, you're starting your own business. What did you struggle with in the early days? And then I want you to tell us what keeps you up at night today.
Oh, girl. For sure, I did everything on my own. That was the hardest thing, is starting off. And this has a lot to do with my money story and my relationship with abundance and attracting money into my world and all of that. Because I grew up basically with a missionary family. So we had people who would just leave bags of clothes on our porch. And so I had a very strong poverty mindset. We were the charity case. And so one of the things that my parents would say all the time is when we would pass, I don't know how old you are, but back in the 80s.
Yeah, I'm old. So yeah.
Well, you look fantastic. So good on you. But I don't know if you remember this. Back in the 80s, there were, I guess they still kind of have them maybe, but they were outside of supermarkets where you could like ride a little thing for 25 cents. It'd be like you could get in a little helicopter.
Oh, yes, like yes. Mm-hmm.
Literally 25 cents. And so I would always say, oh, please, can I ride that airplane or whatever it was? And my dad would always say, we don't need to spend money on that. We don't need to spend money on that. We don't need to spend money on that. And that became a part of my inner narrative. So one of the things, by the way, that anchors into the subconscious, like we were talking about, is when things are on repetition. So anything you've heard multiple times over and over again, it usually drops down into truth. So things your parents said, things a spouse or partner said, things you heard in a religion, it, especially if it's prior to age 8, drops right into that subconscious mind. So for me, I was like, oh, I don't need to spend money on that. Oh, a new website? Fuck that. I'll do it myself. I'll learn how to do that. Oh, podcast? I'll learn how to do it. I'll produce it myself. Oh, graphics? Okay, sweet. I'll do that myself. And oh, I don't need to spend money on that. That was the narrative. That was the constant phrasing that was happening in my mind over and over again. And it wasn't until probably about 7 years ago, in 2014 was a distinctive year where I shifted a lot of that perspective around money. And that was one of the pieces that I had to let go of in my business was, okay, what are the things that I really love doing? And like, let's say doing those things and then hire out. And that took a lot for me to shift and change. But that is, of course, I'm grateful for the journey, but that is definitely something I would change if I had it all to do over again. I would have invested in help so much sooner.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm doing everything myself.
Yep.
But, I'm still early in this stuff. So.
And then, so what keeps me up at night? Is it related to my business or not?
Yeah, your business girl.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like, pretty much this presidency.
Yeah, I know that too.
Like everything in the world keeps me up at night. But related to my business,
like, is it marketing? Is it, I don't know, your client list, or do you feel like you have like a lot of work and, just like what do you struggle with today?
I'm in a good place with all of that. I think what hits me the most now is for the last, about 2 years. It was just about 2 years ago, I had a massive kind of epic breakdown. And it was kind of the convergence of a bunch of stress. We had moved across the country and there was just a bunch of things that were changing in my world. I was a primary breadwinner and was taking all of 100%, like taking care of the household. So there was a lot of incurred stress that I had at the time. And ever since then, the naturopath that I went to had diagnosed me with pretty severe adrenal fatigue. And we thought maybe it might be thyroid issues and things like that. So since then, it has been this slow trudge of like trying to get better and back to the stamina that I used to have. So I think the thing that bothers me the most is feeling like I can't do as much as I used to. And there are so many cool projects and things I want to implement in my business. And I just have to recognize that my pace is very different right now because of my health. And it's not a quick fix. And it's something that I really have to tend to. But I really think our bodies talk to us in that way. And they're like, bitch, if you're not going to slow down, I'm going to slow your ass down.
Yep.
And you know what I mean? Like, here, take this to deal with. And I truly think that was what I needed, because I was burning the candle at both ends and I was working my ass off. So, I think that it's very interesting coming off of being a high achiever, a recovering perfectionist, constantly checking off the boxes, to someone who really truly has to slow down. I have a hard time sometimes voting on how I'm spending my time. Okay. And, but then I have to remind myself, this is why I did it. This is exactly why I created my own business, so I could have white space, so that I could have freedom. And thank God that I did, because now I do have the space to still run my business and have rest, which I'm so grateful for.
Yep. That's what we all want.
Yeah.
So I talk shit to myself all day. Not necessarily all bad, but sometimes, your reality is what it is, right? So what would you say is healthy shit talking versus unhealthy shit talking? And how were you able to learn the difference?
this is really an in-depth question. Well, first of all, I have to say, it doesn't always sound like words to people. So I get very literal phrases in my head where I will hear a phrase like, oh, that's not possible for you, or that's not realistic, or something like that. I will also get gut feelings. So for example, if I'm scrolling through Instagram and I see somebody who I went to coaching school with, let's say, and they're on like their third book or their fourth book or something like that, I won't have a literal phrase that goes off that says that's not possible for you or you're not good enough. I won't have that. I'll just have a sinking feeling. And it'll be like sort of a pit of the stomach feeling. And so sometimes people's inner critic will show up in it as an emotional current. So starting by excavating behind that, wherever the entry point is, start noticing that. And so I think that a majority of the time, that inner critic, that inner shit talker is genuinely trying to keep you safe, like we were talking about earlier. It's going, oh, we don't know how to be empowered, right? We don't know how to not give a shit about what everybody else thinks. We better stay here. So I'm just going to talk shit to you so you stay here. So it's kind of like that one friend that we're all trying to distance ourselves from. Like, no, you're not helpful. That's not helpful. I understand your perspective, but that's not useful. So I think the first thing is to genuinely understand that part of us is fighting to stay the same because it's registering that as safe. So when we can just recognize, oh, that's why it's doing that. And I had a coaching instructor who said, when your inner shit talker gets loud, that means you're onto something. Because it only starts kicking up when you're starting to play bigger, when you're thinking about speaking up for yourself, when you're starting a new business, when you are scared to put yourself out there, when you're entering a new dating scenario. That's when it gets loud. It doesn't get super loud when you're complacent and not doing anything scary. So I think recognizing, that's been one thing that's been really helpful for me, is the moment I hear that voice or that emotion coming in, I go, oh, you must be onto something. You must be onto something, because they are trying to keep you the same. And that reminds me, like, okay, they're just doing their job. And so I will speak to them like, girl, I know you are scared. Of course you're scared. We've never done this before, but just calm down. I've got you. We're going to proceed with normal. I don't know. Did you ever watch Family Guy?
I've seen it like in passing, but I've never really watched like the whole series.
Okay. So there's a baby on there who has like a British accent. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you may have seen him. His name is Stewie, right? So there's this like kind of famous scene where he is talking to his mom, and he just goes on and on and on. And he's like, Lois, mum, mummy, mum, mummy, mum.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Right? It goes, and you're like, mother of God, shut this baby up. And so finally the mom goes, what? And he goes, hi, and then runs away. Mm-hmm. I just want to say hi. That is exactly what's happening with our inner critic. It just will mess with you and mess with you and mess with you unless you acknowledge it. It's usually a loop. It sounds like it's going over and over and over again, or it's that pit in the stomach over and over and over again, and recognizing it and going, okay, what's happening here? Oh, I'm afraid to put myself out there. I've never done that before. Or I've never called up this particular contact, or I'm nervous about being rejected. And then you can go, okay, I see why you're kicking up a shitstorm. You're scared of this. You're allowed to be scared. You're allowed to be scared, but we're going to behave from a place of courage instead of fear. So, Elizabeth Gilbert always talks about fear gets to have, a voice. It gets to be there, but it doesn't get to have a vote. So yes, fear is going to be along for the ride with us always, and it has a voice, but it does not get to have a vote. It does not get to have the final say. So I prefer to behave from a place of courage. But to answer your question, I think it's first of all just tuning in to what that sounds like or feels like, and noticing when it gets loud, and then starting to actually converse with it. And one of the things that I teach a lot in my main program is matching the intensity of that shit talker, of that inner critic, because everybody has a different one, right? And sometimes we have multiple ones for different areas. Everyone's different. But if your inner critic is sassy or loud, or maybe they're really quiet and demure, but they're like looking down on you always, and oh, I can't believe it, right? You have to match the intensity of whatever that inner critic is. You don't have to be equally as snarky necessarily, but you have to be equally as powerful. So if you're trying to say something to yourself, you know, let's say your inner critic is like, that's stupid. You can never do that. Oh my gosh, you're not enough. Ew, what are you even trying to do? Matching that with something like, okay, you need to sit down. That is super rude and not helpful, and we're not going down that path. You don't necessarily have to be bitchy, but you have to match the intensity of the inner critic. Versus what a lot of people teach, which is to go, it's okay, I love myself, let's just do positive affirmations, and it'll all be shit and glitter. And it's not, right? Like, you have to be able to match whatever is happening inside with that inner narrative.
So why do you think we care what others think, and why is it so hard to retrain ourselves?
Well, part of this goes back to our biological makeup. So a lot of it. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but one of our primary basic human needs is the sense of belonging. So before we can even think about having self-actualization or importance in the world, we have to feel as though we belong. So, and this comes from the days of old, when if you did not belong to a community, that meant you died, right? Like, you needed the support of another group in order to survive. And now we don't necessarily have that, but we still have that same fear response. So the way that manifests is not necessarily I'm alone in the wilderness by myself and I might get eaten by a lion type of fear, but now it's, oh my gosh, if Jane from accounting doesn't like me or doesn't like my report, or if this client doesn't hire me, then that must mean I might die. And I know that sounds incredibly hyperbolic and dramatic, but that's what's happening on a subconscious level. We think that we are somehow in danger if somebody doesn't approve of us or see it our way or reward us. We do this all the time in relationships. If a family member doesn't agree with us, we think, oh my gosh, I'm actually in danger. That's, again, the lizard brain subconscious piece of the mind. But giving yourself a little bit of compassion to go, oh, okay, no wonder I'm wired for that. I'm wired for connection. I'm wired to want to find favor in my community. And I also recognize now that I'm not going to die if my mom doesn't like my decision that I just made. But I think a lot of that comes down to emotional intelligence and being able to be with uncomfortable emotions. That's one of the biggest things with people pleasing is you are engaging with somebody, they don't like what you have to say, or they don't agree with you, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. And we want that uncomfortable feeling to stop at all costs. So what we usually do is we acquiesce and we people please. What can I do to smooth this over? So part of that big lesson is learning how to be with whatever you're feeling, being with opposition and sitting in it instead of going, I've got to repair. And all of that comes back cyclical to self-worth. Like, I'm responsible to make everybody else happy. And that will then make me worthy. That will then make me valuable if I'm liked. So it gets really complicated, but I do think if we just recognize and give ourselves a little compassion of like, oh, okay, there's a primitive reason why we search out the approval of others, and we can have a different skill set to change that behavior.
Yeah, we definitely have to change that behavior because it's just not good.
Right.
So I looked up something that said people pleasers often deal with low self-esteem and draw their self-worth from the approval of others. You may believe people only care about you when you're useful and need their praise and appreciation in order to feel good about yourself. So is there a spectrum when it comes to people pleasing? Because I personally enjoy doing things for people that I love, but I don't have issues in some of the other areas, like not being able to speak up for myself or not raising my voice when I'm angry, or not telling someone when I need help. Like, those things aren't my issue, but I do love, doing nice things for people that I care about. So
Yes.
Is there a spectrum?
Absolutely. And you're actually talking about something different. So yes, there's absolutely a spectrum. I'm going to take that first section. There are people, this is really, really common. So I'm glad you brought this up. It's very common to have one area where it hurts and everywhere else you feel really good. And so you might not have these big stumbling blocks in the area of speaking up. Maybe that's not the way in which it manifests for you, but maybe it manifests in, I don't take risks in my business, or I don't invest financially in myself. That's also tied to self-worth. So there can be a ton of different elements. So that's what I usually will look at people like, okay, where's the pain? Where does it hurt? And how is it being manifested? And then usually the root cause is somewhere in a belief system of, I'm not valuable, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy. We use different semantics for it. So now what I think you're talking about, which is another distinction, is when you are legitimately fulfilled by giving to others. And this can be very sticky because I categorize this as a core value, right? So my guess would be that you have a core value around giving back, around impact, philanthropy, being of service, generosity, kindness. It may have whatever name you would ascribe to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, that's me.
Okay. But with every core value, there is a line of when it's fulfilling you, when it's bringing you happiness, and then when it steals your happiness. So for example, I could have a very strong value around order and organization, let's say. I love when things are clean and put together and P-touched and color-coded and just in their correct spot, right? I love that. Now, if I am organizing my file folders and that's bringing me this immense joy, that's when that value around order and organization is totally in service of me. It's lighting me up. I love it. Now, if other people come over to my house and I want to commune with them and I want to connect, but I can't calm down because I feel like I need to clean up the kitchen or put the dishes away, and so now it is stealing my joy. It's in control of me. And that happens with a lot of values around things like what you're talking about. People who are in helping professions, people who genuinely are lit up by generosity to their friends and family. It can also happen with values around achievement or accomplishment, where there's that fine line between here's when it lights me up and then here's when it steals my joy. And that's another place to look, because my guess would be there are times when it really is fulfilling for you to be there for your family. And then there's other times when it feels like it is robbing you of your life force. And so that's where boundaries come in. That's where you start to be able to advocate for what you need in any given situation. So I think that's a good distinction to have there, that there is a sliding scale with values and also with what people pleasing really is. And so the way that I kind of define or describe people pleasing is when you are twisting or contorting to make other people happy, and it is of a sacrifice to you in some way, where you're not being authentic, you're sacrificing your time, your energy, you're straight up lying, where it's a piece of your integrity. So that's really the distinction. The line is this at a severe cost to me?
Okay. So
I told you to interrupt me.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're thorough, girl. That's nothing wrong with that. So I want you to give us an example of how you can stand up for yourself without being an asshole.
Oh, okay. Well, this kind of comes all full circle with everything we've talked about today. So I had a situation where my mom would routinely invite me to church functions. And I would find it really offensive because I had been quite clear that that wasn't something that I agreed with any longer. And I fully support her and want her to do whatever lights her up. And so there was a moment where she had asked me again if I wanted to go to a function. And so I had this moment, and I think a lot of times in those moments, one of the hardest pieces is to control ourselves emotionally because we want to fight, right? Primitive fight or flight response. We want to fight or we want to run away. I'll talk to you later, or take somebody to school.
Right.
And so in that moment, I was like, okay, let me pull myself together. And I said, listen, I fully understand that this is something that you live and breathe and that it is so important to you. However, it feels that I am very much not heard when I have expressed to you over and over again that I don't want to be invited to those sorts of things. And conversely, I don't invite you to summer solstice or, I don't talk to you about astrology or the things that you find to be incredibly wrong and that you morally object to. And I would really like the same respect in return. So here's what I can promise you. If I ever change my mind, you will absolutely be the first person that I tell. You will absolutely be the first person. So here's my request going forward. My request is that you do not bring up anything related to these events or invite me any longer. When I've expressed that to you and you don't respect it, it feels incredibly dismissive. And I'm sure that's not your intention. I'm sure you're just genuinely pained that your daughter doesn't believe the way you do. And I can understand that that'd be incredibly painful. But this is my request going forward. So that's what it looks like, and obviously that's a little more lengthy, a little more practiced because I've been able to do that quite often. But most of the time it's stating, listen, I'm sure it's not your intention to come across this way. Or I'm sure it's not your intention to drive me away or whatever. I love using that word. Or you can also state what your intention is by saying, hey, please know it's not my intention to rock the boat, or it's not my intention to be ungrateful. You can use that as sort of an entry point. But then to very clearly state your request and to do it in a way that is very, very specific. So not saying something like, I need you to respect me more. Like, what the fuck does that mean? Nobody knows what that means. You have to say, please don't say these words. Please don't invite me to these things. Please don't bring up this topic. Please don't do this behavior. It would mean the world to me if you could respect that. I truly hope you can understand. And it's going to vary depending on the relationship. Some are much more collaborative. So you are able to, like, okay, let me hear your side and let's bounce stuff off of one another. And sometimes it's a clear-cut boundary of like, here's what I'm not going to tolerate anymore going forward. So there's a sort of synopsis of speaking up for yourself.
All right. So we're going to play a game called Oh Hell No, Oh Hell Yes. I'm going to ask you like 5 different questions or 5 different scenarios. And you tell me if it's an oh hell no or oh hell yes type of situation related to people pleasing.
Okay.
So the first one, your boss asks you to work overtime hours and you don't want to, but you stay and work the hours. Is this an oh hell yes or oh hell no?
Oh, this is oh hell maybe. It really depends on what you want, and it also depends on the relationship with your boss, because it could be that you don't want it in the immediate, but if you do stay longer and there's an understanding and a communication with your boss that you are working towards a promotion, let's say, it could be one of those pieces. I would say more often than not, though, it's an oh hell no. And it would be a matter of saying, I truly wish I could come through for you. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do that. I'm not able to stay late today. Truly hope you can understand. Thank you so much for thanking me, that kind of thing.
Okay, that's good. Your spouse wants to have sex regularly, but you are tired and you decide you're not going to do it at all. Oh, hell no, or oh, hell yes.
This is another one. Okay. So first of all, let's be fucking clear. You never, ever, ever have to do anything with your body that you don't want to do, period. Whether you're in a relationship or not. I think that goes without saying. Now, the other piece of that, though, is I think we all deserve a really flourishing, healthy, vivacious sex life. And so much of the time, there's other things that are infringing on that, like stress and perhaps work. So I would also say, are there other elements that need to be looked at in order for me to say, you know what, I'm actually not wanting to connect with my partner because there's other shit going on. Like we're not communicating, or I don't feel supported, or maybe I'm going through menopause or dealing with a pregnancy and I don't hormonally have an interest, right? There's so many different things. But one of the biggest pieces I think around that is, John Gottman has a concept around turning towards, turning away, and turning against. And so I think when we say, oh, hell no, in that sort of a situation, to not turn against that person, like, what's wrong with you? Why do you always want, oh, God, your libido, get it off, right? Not turning against, not turning away where you just completely ignore them, run away, pretend you have a headache, but turning towards, saying, I hear you and I see you, and I'm so grateful that I have a spouse who has an interest in me. And I really want to work through this. And I am not in that headspace right now. Can we take a rain check, or let's put it on our calendar like it's a vacation and like we have something to look forward to, So I think, again, it's going to depend.
Yeah, I agree. Cause I think that when you're in a marriage, you should really be trying to meet the needs of your spouse, just like you want your needs met. So, trust and believe, that's not my problem, guys. So that was just really a question. So, your bestie calls you and you listen to her vent about some heavy stuff and you miss your appointment at the nail salon. Is this an oh hell no or oh hell yes? Are you being too giving, or should you?
This one's a no hell yes for me. This is tricky because I also feel in integrity that if you have an appointment, you handle it. So what I would do in a situation like that is I would absolutely choose my best friend. If she was going through, now, if it was some drama bullshit, like things that I've been hearing all the time and, not taking my advice or not listening to what I have to say, then I'd be like, we have to reconvene on this. But if it was something where she was in a really dire situation and she really needed my listening ear, I'd be like, let me get right there. I'm going to go cancel this appointment real quick, and then I'm going to be there for you. But I also find it really shitty to leave anybody high and dry on an appointment.
Yeah. So your friend asked you to come out to celebrate her birthday, but you declined because you don't like her friend group. Is this an oh hell no or oh hell yes?
Yeah, this is an oh hell yes. I would absolutely do that. But I would also be very clear about that with that friend of mine. I would say, you know what? I don't feel as though I vibe or really gel well with them. And truth be told, I adore hanging out with you. I love you to pieces. But man, I feel zapped every time I'm around so-and-so and so-and-so. And I want you to have an amazing time. Why don't we go get drinks next week?
Girl, I do that all the time.
Yeah. Ew. I'm way too old for that shit.
Right. You tell your boss that you are not interested in being on this new project because it requires you to drive 3 hours to the client office and you hate long distance driving. Is this an oh hell yes or oh hell no?
Oh hell yes, for sure. But I also think it is. I'm saying, oh, hell yes, like I'm on board with this statement, right?
Right.
I should have clarified that before at the beginning of the game. I love this, by the way. I could do this for hours. I would absolutely stand up for myself and say, no, I don't want to do that, but I would come with alternate solutions. And I would say, what would you think about this? What would you think about Zoom conferences? What would you, I would come with a bunch of alternatives. Or what if I take it once a month and then so-and-so takes it the other, 3 times during the month? I would not defiantly say no unless I had a really strong argument about, here's why, here's the way in which I think it's going to be a detriment to our company and to our bottom line, always coming back to that bottom line. Here's how I think it's going to affect company morale. Here's how, I feel like I'm stretched to the limit. Truth be told, I hope that I make things look really easy, but truth be told, I'm at my limit and I don't know if I can survive a commute like that. So I would be very clear, but then also come with alternative solutions.
Yeah, perfect. So do you feel like you are doing purpose-driven work? And if so, in what capacity?
No, I don't.
Are you kidding me? No.
Have you ever had anyone say no?
I've had people say that they feel like, they're on their way, like this might be one part, there's layers. And, I get it, because there's different things that your life is purposed for,
Sure.
It's not just one thing. So I totally get it.
Yeah. Well, I on that note, I feel like I'm in a season. So for, I've been doing this for, I went to coaching school in the mid 2000s. So like 15 years, this has been a part of my life. And I've been solely my own business for 10 years. So there has been a massive season of struggle and difficult times. And I feel like I've finally, over the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years, gotten to a really comfortable place. And so this year has been one of accumulations of, like my NLP certification and finishing my hypnosis certification and gathering new instruments through which to do this work. And so I'm really looking forward to the next iteration in my business, but I can't survive if I don't feel passion, I just, period, I can't. And I think one of the things that is so amazing about, all the recent generations, I think, Gen X, Millennial, and Z, is that we have so many options and we have so much available to us. It's not like, my parents, where they had to pick one thing. You had to pick one thing and you did that till you died, right? Like, we have so much innovation. We have the ability to connect. We have a new platform every 2 seconds. So I am constantly looking at what's the new iteration for me, but I don't want to do anything if I'm not passionate about it.
Yeah,
no.
Absolutely. I agree. Sometimes you got to pay the bills and,
right. I don't want to do taxes. I'm not passionate about that, but I still got to get that done.
Yeah. So I want you to share the name of one person that has inspired you in your life. And it doesn't have to be their government, but you could just be like Melissa or Teddy or whatever.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And it could be for anything, like maybe inspired you to get a certification or inspired you to do makeup or inspired you to do a speaking engagement, whatever.
Oh my God. There's so many. I think there was a makeup artist who I worked with like 16 years ago. And he said, makeup is not about covering up who you are. It's about defining who you are with the choices that you make. And I was like, damn, if that's not true. So I think that's applicable in so many other realms, right? And how we choose to show up in this world. It's so for me, that the way that I kind of took that and was inspired by that is I looked at, am I showing up in the world through the choices that I make? Is that congruent with the woman that I want to be? Or am I making these choices to cover up and hide and people please? And because there was a long time, I know you have your master's, and there was a long time when I wanted to do master's and then get a doctoral degree. And truth be told, it was for everybody else. It was for the clout. It was for the notoriety. It wasn't because of who I really wanted to be in this world, at least not now, not at this chapter. And I recognized, okay, that was a goal that was based off of covering up who I am, who so that other people could see me in a specific way. So I think now I always look at, okay, what is appealing about this goal? What is, and how can I continue to live in a way that feels authentic to the woman that I want to be in this world? And that's constantly changing.
Okay. So I want you to now share your oh hell no moment, a moment that has inspired you or changed your perspective on something or taught you a lesson.
I think it would absolutely have to be that moment with my mom at my dad's funeral. And that was so pivotal for me in the metaphor even of that one isolated incident, the metaphor of that compared to my entire life of trying to make everybody else happy, that everybody else can dictate my worth through their approval of me. And that was when I kind of threw down the gauntlet and said, oh, hell no to that. And that really has informed, so grateful for that, because that has truly informed the work that I do now. And to your point before, it's what keeps me honest, and walking my talk. So yeah, I'd have to say that one.
So Amy, it was such a pleasure having you on the show. Please tell us where we can connect with you and learn all about your book. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about your book, but I think that we covered a lot. So I think people can know what to expect in that book.
Yeah, it's a free ebook that anybody can get their hands on. If you just go over to my little corner of the internet, which is thejoyjunkie.com, and junkie is spelled Junkie. And that's kind of my hub. You'll see the free ebook that you can grab. And there it's really a workbook. There's, a series of challenges that you can use to start implementing in your life. But I do a podcast with my husband as well. And there's free workshops and a bunch of free shit. So go sink your teeth into that stuff. And I think you'll know pretty quickly I'm either for you or not.
I think you're for me.
Oh, thanks.
It was such a pleasure having you on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely.
It takes a lot to turn an idea into a business. Yahoo Small Business has everything you need to start and grow your business. Get online for free. Visit www.yahoosmallbusiness.com. Out with the old and in with the new. Start your new year with Yahoo Small Business, with everything you need to start and grow your business. Find a domain, get a business email, and create a new professional website. Have a business idea and don't know where to start? Visit www.yahoosmallbusiness.com.